Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you are doing well. So today we've got we've got a real good one. We've got another one from Dork Side of the Force. This one by Jonathan Morales saying, Fandom, was The Last Jedi really the breaking point? I'm pretty sure you can look at the numbers, you can look at the audience reaction to that film, and know very clearly that that was indeed the breaking point for a lot of people. I did a video the other day covering a really great article by Matthew Kadish. If you haven't checked that out, please go see yesterday's video. Also, please go check out my Twitter where I just, again, really talk about how awesome that article is, because it breaks down why The Last Jedi is bad just from a narrative standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint. So it takes in a very objective point of view as to why that film just didn't work for so many reasons and why it made so many people just lose touch with the film as it was, and then towards the end end up just hating the film overall because of those problems, especially those narrative problems as well. So I don't think there's any doubt that The Last Jedi really was the breaking point, but let's see what Dorkside has to say. They always have something very interesting to say, and let's just see. So when Star Wars The Last Jedi causes a small rift within the fan base, let's consider the alternative. Consider this for a moment. Let me try and get this bigger for you guys. So consider this for a moment. There was a time when we had seen the last live-action Star Wars movie ever to be made. 13 years ago when Revenge of the Sith was released, it was a possibility that it would be the last live-action Star Wars movie ever. George Lucas had been saddled with so much hatred of the prequel trilogy, he had resigned himself to the fact that he'd never make another live-action movie again. This is all very true. I mean, I'm one of those persons that I was not a big fan of the trilogy, still am not a huge fan of the trilogy, though I think that Revenge of the Sith was actually received a lot better than a lot of other films were, especially the previous two, especially after Attack of the Clones, which to me was the weakest of the prequel trilogy. But even though that's the case, most people's critiques were the writing and were some of the characters brought in, like Jar Jar Binks. But overall, as far as the characters that were brought in and as far as some of the stories that were being told, there was enough interest there to keep people involved. I mean, you cannot deny that there were not people buying all of these different toys. I mean, for me, for example, I was very much into the pod racing game as a kid because kids like those kinds of things. And so to say that this is not, that it didn't sell as well, or to say that it was, kind of to at least to insinuate that it was broken before this, is to me not really being honest. But let's see if that's actually what they're saying, if they're trying to go a different route with this. So now there's a good portion of the Star Wars fandom that seemed content with this fact. Who could blame them? With the excellent Clone Wars animated series, it seemed the future of Star Wars had found the perfect medium to deliver incredibly deep and profound stories. We received stories that answered so many of our questions about the Force, Mandalore, the Clone Wars themselves, and if we'd ever see Darth Maul in action again. Again, that's also a very good point. Again, the Clone Wars, I've only seen about 10 episodes of the show so far, and I'm loving every second of it. It's one show that a lot of people loved, and it's also one of the first things, and this is what I think that this article is not going to mention, it's one of the first things that Kathleen Kennedy did when she took over. One of the first things that she did was she ended the Clone Wars series, and as this person's saying, it was one of the only good things going at the time, because the prequels did not leave a very good taste in a lot of people's mouths, though even now to this day, there are so many people who will comment on my videos saying, hey, I like the prequels a lot, I like the characters, I like the stories, and I totally respect them for that opinion, just like I respect anyone who liked The Last Jedi, as long as they're willing to admit that there are indeed narrative flaws, philosophical flaws to the narrative of the story, but that's for another day. Let's go on. Then the unimaginable happened. Disney, which had understood the power of Star Wars, decided to purchase Lucasfilm from a now retired George Lucas. Now for fans such as myself, this announcement was met with unbridled joy. I would be getting more of the franchise I love so much. I'd read plenty of the extended universe novels and comics, played my fair share of the video games, but this meant more new Star Wars and in its intended form on the big screen. I agree. I was also very excited when Star Wars was bought back in 2012, and it was very exciting because I saw what Disney had done with Marvel. Everything had been awesome. All the choices they made were great. Is every Marvel film great? I mean, I would say that there can be an argument to say that there are some definitely weak films in there, but I don't think anyone can deny that the quality of those films is not better. Is not better than a lot of the other films that come out in a given year. Even though it might not be strong when compared to all 20 films that have come out from Marvel at this point, as far as this year is concerned, one could easily say that even the weakest Marvel film is better than a lot of the other films that tend to come out in a year, at least from an action movie standpoint. So I agree. I was also very excited for Star Wars. So let's see what is actually going on. Like, what is this person trying? What is the point that this person is trying to make? Is the House of Mouse getting undeserved hatred? No. They're not. And also, the hatred really isn't being geared towards towards Disney. It's towards the people who are in charge of, directly in charge of the Star Wars universe. Kathleen Kennedy, director-wise, Rian Johnson, all of these people, the story group, the infamous story group that I just broke down the other day about why they had no experience beforehand and why they really are not qualified to be the infamous story group as we know it. So those are the people that people are going after. Those are the people that are being criticized. It has less to do with Disney's involvement and more to do with the people who they have currently working for Disney that are actually getting. So no. Is the House of Mouse? No, Disney's not really getting attacked. It's the people who are driving Star Wars into the ground who are getting the criticism. So for some fans of the franchise, this was the worst thing that could happen. Some people genuinely hate Disney. Again, I understand that. I know a lot of people don't like them. Personally, I don't understand it, but there are certainly things I hate that people love. It genuinely seems that this contingent of fans, that no matter what Disney does with the franchise, they will hate it. That's their prerogative, and it seems their negativity has spewed all across the internet since the purchase. And again, this is them mixing things together, mixing stories, mixing facts together to try and make up something that's not true. You cannot tell me that the same people who hate Disney and everything that Disney does are the group of people, for the most part, who are upset with what's going on with The Last Jedi. I mean, just look to Jeremy at Geeks and Gamers. He is one of the most vocal critics of The Last Jedi, of Kathleen Kennedy, of Rian Johnson, and yet he loves Disney. He still goes to the theme parks. He's excited for the Star Wars theme park that's going to be a part of Disney. He is so excited. There are so many people who love Disney films. I'm still a person. I love Disney. I love the Pixar films that come out. So to say that we're somehow this group that just hates Disney and everything it does is just twisting reality. Again, this is what these people love to do, especially Dork Side of the Force, but also a lot of people in the media. They love to twist reality. They love to twist the facts to try and, fit their narrative, when in reality, it's just not the case. Most people who are critical of The Last Jedi, most people who are critical of the current state of Star Wars, have no problem with Disney. They have a problem with the direction of the characters. There are characters that could have gone in very interesting directions. There are characters that they could have really, branched out and made really awesome, great additions to the Star Wars universe, but instead they gave us weak, undeveloped characters that were almost entirely destroyed by The Last Jedi. So yes, The Last Jedi, going back to your original question, yes, The Last Jedi was the breaking point, because you once again are just ignoring the facts, ignoring reality, and in fact you're just trying to twist everything to fit your own narrative. But let's see what you have to say from here. From other fans, the hatred stems from Lucasfilm's decision to remove the popular expanding universe from the Star Wars canon. Although these stories are still very much available for consumption and have been renamed Star Wars Legends, for fans who had invested so much time with the EU, it seemed like a genuine slap in the face. And I think the reason why is not because they said that the EU wasn't canon anymore. The reason why is because they said all of the EU is no longer canon. They just broad brush said everything's non-canon anymore, instead of actually breaking down saying, okay, this works, or just say this is going to be something where some things might just become legends and some things might become canon. They just decided to say everything is non-canon. Now what you see them do is they see that now that they've done that and they've seen the financial effect that it's had on their business, now they're starting to take these non-canon characters and some of these non-canon stories and bring them into the canon. So they are, I mean, to say that this is just something that some people hate, it's like, no, this is something that affected a lot of people because there are some really great stories. I've been personally getting involved in the Thrawn trilogy. I'm halfway through Heir to the Throne, I think is what it's called, but I just know this is the first book in the Thrawn trilogy, and I've been listening to an audiobook, and it is fantastic. I'm halfway through, and I'm loving every second of it, so I can understand why people would be pissed, but it has nothing to do with them just taking out parts of the extended universe. It's them just saying broadly, everything in the extended universe is not canon, and now they're backtracking saying, oh, well, now this can be canon, this can be canon. And it's just like, just admit that you made a mistake. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't really understand how this really helps your point. Alright, the movie, however, was the only logical choice if the desire was to move forward making films. With so much material having been created regarding both the time before the films and the time following the films, how could Lucasfilm possibly make a movie and keep all Star Wars fans happy? And at the same time, how could they make a movie that the casual film audience didn't need an appendix to follow what's going on? And again, I understand that. That's why, taking out bits and parts of the canon, or rather, solidifying parts of the canon is not a bad thing. It's just, again, when you just get rid of everything and call everything non-canon, that causes a lot of problems. And also, when you backtrack on that and then don't admit that you ever made a mistake in the first place, that is also causing problems as well. And it also goes back to the fact that the new characters that are being developed are not strong characters. If they were characters, if Finn and Rey were written as strong characters, you would not be hearing as much complaining. You might hear some people say, oh, I really wish Thrawn was canon, I really wish that Darth Plagueis, all these other things were canon. I'm sure, I know that some of those things might be, parts of those things might be canon, since especially I know that Thrawn is involved in the Clone Wars Rebels series at some point. But still, like, the stories themselves, you could have at least, you could have left it open-ended before just saying everything's not canon anymore. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense from a financial perspective. Again, when you go after the fans and what they love, that's not good business. in general. Moving forward with Star Wars. As we move forward without the former EU, it appears criticism of The Last Jedi lies in and around story choices. This is, in and of itself, understandable. The vitriol behind the criticism, however, is not understandable. Again, what are you talking about? Because we're being critical of Rey because she's not a very good character? Because she's a weak character? Again, you can defend certain elements of her character, because I thought that there was a lot of potential with her character after The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi just did away with it and made it very uninteresting and just continued this Mary Sue narrative, which just doesn't, like any film that does that has a character that's just magically good at everything without an explanation, especially when it's in a universe that's already been pre-established for the past 30 years, I'm sorry, but you're going to piss off a lot of people, and rightly so, because a weak character is a weak character. That's not just a subjective opinion, that's a narrative, that's an objective narrative understanding of what they're doing with the character. Again, go and read that article by Matthew Kadish. He goes into even further detail about how elements of the story of The Last Jedi themselves violate certain philosophical principles to writing that just make it just not work at all. So yes, you're absolutely right that one can be critical of these stories, and we are, and yes, we are absolutely justified in being critical of these stories because they're not very good. However, in Passion Fails, we feel about the franchise as fan, we don't own it, and it's not solely ours. The franchise is supposed to evolve beyond what we remember. It's how the story lives on for a new generation of fans that can relate to these new characters better than we do, and the reality is we may not be wholly attuned to what they symbolize as a whole. So this is, you know, with characters that they can connect to. It's like, no, I'm sorry, but there are so many characters in the original trilogy that anyone can connect to, no matter what their race or no matter what their gender is. I'm sorry, but that's just a cop-out argument to say, oh, these are just new stories with new characters for a new audience. Well, tell me this. Did that new audience come out to support those characters in Solo: A Star Wars Story? No. They're losing $200 million. Is this audience going to keep on coming for these supposed new characters for the supposed new audience when you're going to create bad characters that no one wants to see? No. Why do you think we saw a $700 million loss between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi? Why do you think Solo is not going to even crack $400 million at this point? I'm sorry, but you cannot ignore these hard facts. And it just bothers me again so much, and I say this all the time, but it's just true. You cannot just ignore these things and act like, oh, everyone who's being critical of The Last Jedi is a racist or a sexist, is vitriolic, is just disgusting. Are there people out there who are critical of The Last Jedi who are those things? Sure. Just like there's someone who's disgusting that's a part of any organization or any group that's ever existed in the history of humanity, because that human nature is inherently flawed. And people just don't want to admit that. People just don't want to, again, base themselves in reality. They'd rather write this garbage. All right, with the news that the Clone Wars series is returning, coming out of Comic-Con, and all other new contents being created, it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan. If it's no longer the Star Wars you love and remember, you can always watch the original trilogy and read Star Wars Legends. But please, don't ruin the fandom for the rest of us. There are real fans who genuinely are enjoying the new stories being told, and there's that language they love to use, the real fans. You know, that's a word that I don't even like to describe myself as. I am just a fan. You know, to try and describe someone as being a real fan is just being silly. I'm sorry, but, you know, there might be some people that do that, who might be on my side of things, who might be, you know, in agreement with the things that I say, but I just think that it's not the best road to go down, because to say someone is not a real fan, to question someone's fandom, to me is just silliness, because that's where you go purely into the subjective side of things. You cannot objectively prove that someone is not a true fan. However, there are objective truths out there. There are objective truths about why Solo and why, you know, The Last Jedi were not very good stories, why the characters were very weak, why the audiences were not compelled to watch them. And if the whole argument is that these are just new characters, and if you're just too old, if you're just a part of the old trilogy, you know, just watch it and don't ruin it for everyone else. Well, I'm sorry, but no one else is really starting to support these films. Just look at I mean, if you want even more evidence, you can look at the box office of Solo. Look to toy sales. Look to the fact that you can get so many of these new toys from these new characters, based on these new characters, for dirt cheap. That's never happened before in the history of Star Wars. Even when the prequels came out, even with all of the nonsense with the prequels, people were still buying the merchandise. People were still buying the films. That's the reason why not one of those films lost a dime. But Solo has. That's that new direction. That's that new audience that they're going out to. And guess what? It's starting to show it's not enough. Why do you think The Force Awakens made $2 billion? Because you had so many fans who loved Star Wars who wanted to see the story continued. They soon realized with The Last Jedi, oh, wait a minute. These are not the characters that we're interested in. These are poorly written characters. These are not good stories. And then Solo was, to me, the end, because it lost money. And episode 9, I think, is going to be in a very big financial situation, because is it going to lose money? At this point, I still do not think it's going to lose money. But is it going to break even? Barely? I think that's a much more likely scenario. And is this film going to hit $1 billion? I don't think that's the case. So these are my thoughts on this, though. Again, Dork Side of the Force, I love your name. I love the name Dork Side of the Force. I think that's so creative, but you need to stop writing this nonsense. You need to stop twisting truth, twisting reality, and just come back and base yourself in truth, facts, and figures, and and then I will gladly read the articles and be able to praise everything that you're saying. But unfortunately, that's not what we have. One other thing I want to talk about before we end the video today is this information. I didn't want to do a whole video on it because it's going to be really short. Star Wars, Rian Johnson deletes more than 20,000 tweets following James Gunn's firing. Is there anything that he has to hide? We don't know. Probably not. I honestly, to me, I don't think this is much of a story. I think this is just Hollywood responding to this, trying to protect themselves for certain things that they may have said. Now, honestly, obviously I've made my thoughts on the James Gunn situation very clear. You might not agree with what I had to say, but that is how I feel, and I still stand by my original statements that I made in my video on him and also in my video on the people who are defending him. Again, I stand by those statements, and you can disagree with me all you want, and I respect you for your opinion, and I hope that you can respect me for mine. But when it comes to this situation, I just don't think there's really any evidence whatsoever that he is actually hiding anything, especially since he should know, since he seems to be kind of a smart man, that anything he puts online is going to be saved and backed up no matter what, even if he deletes them. So I think that may have been the case where he just may have been trying to show a sense of solidarity with James Gunn, since he also deleted 20,000. I honestly don't know, but personally, I don't think there's anything there. But guys, what do y'all think? Do you think there's anything to the 20,000 tweets? But also, more importantly, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it is indeed The Last Jedi that broke the fandom? Do you think it is The Last Jedi? Again, I think there's so much more evidence to show that it was The Last Jedi that really caused this rift than anything else. But please, let me know that in the comments below. I'd greatly appreciate it, guys. I read every single comment. I'm not able to respond to every single one, but I promise you I do read every single comment. So thank y'all so much for watching. And also, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. We just broke 2,000 last night, and I'm so incredibly grateful for all my subscribers. Y'all are amazing people, and I love every single one of you. Y'all are fantastic. So thank y'all so much for watching. Have a great day, and as always, God bless.